Hello everyone, welcome to this episode of SQL in the City Streamed. I'm Kathi Kellenberger. I'm the editor of Simple Talk and a data platform MVP, but probably the role that's been most important to me in my professional life has been that of a lifelong learner. Today I'm going to talk to you about how to standardize your team-based development. I mentioned earlier that I'm a lifelong learner, and there have been dozens of SQL Server books that I've learned from over the years. But there are three other books that are not really related to SQL Server that have made a big difference in my career. One of them I read back in the mid-90s called Code Complete, and that was when I was making the transition from a healthcare career to becoming a developer. And in this book, I learned about how important it is to make my code maintainable, make sure that the formatting is good. Hopefully, wherever I would work, there'd be some standards in place, but to always make sure my comments were appropriate, my variable names were named well, and I didn't have a gigantic piece of spaghetti code that things were big problems were broken down into smaller functions and subroutines, for example. Later on, I became a database administrator, and shortly after that, I read the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Now, this is not necessarily a book about technology. It's really for everyone, but it had some really great lessons for me. Probably the #1 lesson is how to be proactive. And I learned that I shouldn't be, as a database administrator, putting out fires all day long, and that I should schedule time to develop tools that I could use to help automate my processes, to save me time. And I also learned that if there is a tool that I could purchase that would help me do my job, maybe something that could write scripts for me, that the return on investment was very good, that those things paid in dividends and time saving. And finally, about 5 years ago, I read this interesting book called The Phoenix Project. And The Phoenix Project is really different. It is for IT, but it's not your typical book that you think of. It's really a novel. And the interesting thing about this is that inside this book, you learn the story of how to implement DevOps in your organization. The book starts out with this company that has this big project that's been going on for years. It's very late, it's over budget, it's not ready, but yet management decides to go ahead and make sure, have it go out over a weekend to obviously disastrous consequences. So this is really the story about how the teams in this IT department learn to trust each other and figure out how to overcome these issues that they had and eventually save the company. So I would recommend taking a look at any of these books to learn more about how to work more effectively in IT. So DevOps is what we're really talking about today, and it's been called the intersection of people, processes, and products. And I didn't represent that as the Venn diagram of the union today because it's more than that. It's really a continuous cycle. I think that the first step is developing that trust between teams, improving communication. And if you don't have that, you can't really progress in DevOps. It's really a culture change. You have processes, for example, deployment processes or certain standards for development. And to really enable those processes, you have to have tools or products. So as I said, I like to represent this as a circle because it's not do it once and done. You'll be continually improving over time. So the subset of today, for at least for me, is talking about standardizing. So why does standardizing make a difference, especially for the database or for database development teams? So first of all, it helps simplify communication. If everybody's using the same tool, then we're all speaking the same language. So that's one of the reasons. And I really think that communication is the foundation of all of this. Improving code quality, and I think of that as partly being about decreasing the number of errors, bugs in the code, but also having certain standards, formatting, variable names, things like that, so that that code is maintainable over time. Facilitating automation. If you have tools that can help you with deployment, let's say, then you're going to go a long way towards achieving DevOps. And all of these are really, really important, but I think especially for database DevOps, you really have to have these things in place. And a lot of companies are really embracing DevOps, but they're slow to bring the database into the process. And part of the issue with that, well, there's a lot of issues. And probably the first one is that the database schema is not in version control. Redgate did a survey, our 2018 State of Database DevOps survey, where we found that only about 58%, at least of the respondents, have their databases in version control. And that, in a way that it might, probably in the general real world out in the wild, is probably less than that, I would think. A lot of times there's no T-SQL code formatting standards. I've done a lot of query tuning over the years, and some of the things I've had to try to unwind and decipher to try to figure out what in the world the query was trying to do before I could ever tune it. That wastes a lot of time. So if you don't have these standards, your code is not going to be as maintainable as it would be otherwise. Not following best practices. So best practices might be something like don't use select star from in your code, something like that. And dev databases don't resemble production. A lot of times they are out of sync with production, or they don't have the amount of data that production has, to help make sure that your performance is going to be good, or the right granularity of data. And if you want to learn more about, what some of the issues are and how frequently companies are following these, take a look at our 2018 Redgate State of Database DevOps, and there's the link right there if you'd like to find it, or just do a search for it as well. You can find it. So what I'd like to talk about as far as standardization is the tools from Redgate that can help you do this. We have this wonderful product called the SQL Tool Belt, and it's 14 SQL Server tools that will help you increase productivity, standardize your T-SQL development, help you follow best practices, and really a whole lot more. I won't have time to talk about all the tools. I'm going to talk about a couple of them today, but here's some of them. And what I've noticed as I go around to different SQL Saturdays and user groups, whenever people realize I'm from Redgate, a lot of them will come up and say, oh, we use SQL Multiscript and we've used it for years and we love it, or we can't even write T-SQL without SQL prompts. So these are used, many, many shops, and they directly improve productivity. So the first one I'm going to show you is SQL source control. So this will allow you to have the database schema in source control. The way it works is that it plugs directly into SQL Server Management Studio, and it integrates with several repository type tools like GitHub or TFS, and there's a number of others, or you can just work with it locally if you want to. It will hold your schema and also reference data such as short lookup lists. And it does a number of things. One of them that I thought was really, really important is that it handles referential integrity. So you don't have to worry about the order of things happening whenever you roll these scripts out. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to a demo. And first thing is my mouse is not working. It is turned on. Okay, because I'll have to do this. I'm going to go over and show you, I'm going to use GitHub today. and I have a copy of Northwind out on GitHub, and you can see I've got, I'm going to check that. What happened? Oh, there was a button. Okay, yay, it's working. Okay, for example, you can see a list of all the tables in Northwind, and there's a script for each table. Okay, so I've already got that out there. And I have, what I'm going to do is, first of all, just show you how to connect a brand new database up to source control. So I'm going to right-click and, create a new database. And this one's going to be called Northwind Dev Josh. And I'm going to click OK. So it's really, really easy for me to connect this up to SQL source control. I'm going to click this button to get the page open. And it's already set to link to my source control system. All I have to do is click Next. And then I can choose which type of source control I'm interested in working with. So I'm going to use Git. And then I have already cloned the repository locally. Let's go with Josh right there. And click Link. Okay, so it's linking right now. There's one more step I'll have to do to pull everything down. I'm going to expand this and open up the tables. So right now I don't have any tables, obviously. And I'm going to go to this Get Latest tab and pull from the remote repository. And once it gets done pulling all of that, I can see that there are a number of objects, and whichever one I click on, I can see the definition. And this is showing me that everything over in my repository is missing in my brand new database. If I wanted to, I could uncheck this box at the top and pick and choose which items that I wanted. Well, today I want everything, so I'm going to click Apply Changes, and it will create all the objects for me. And you can see that they're all there right now. So now Northwind Dev Josh is all up to date. And notice that, you may have noticed that whenever I connected this to the source control, my icon here lit up green. But notice that I've got another Northwind database. I'm going to refresh here so they're close together. Another Northwind Dev James, and it's got this little blue circle, little blue sphere icon right there. And the reason for that is because this one has a change that has not been committed. So if I take a look at, see how the tables are lit up here as well, and there's a new table called U.S. states, and that's a list of the 50 U.S. states plus the District of Columbia. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and send that up to my repository in GitHub. So let me go to make sure I am connected to the right one. And I'm going to type in a comment, add U.S. states table. And I can see that I just have this table for U.S. states, and I need to push that up to source control. So when I click commit, what it does is just copies it to my local repository. There's one more step that I'll have to do here, and that is to click push, which will go ahead and push it up to Git, or up to GitHub. I'm going to go back out there and refresh. Let's see, go back to the table list, and there is my U.S. states table. Another thing that I might want to do is to save that data, since that's not going to change, probably not going to change anytime soon, hopefully. And what I would like to do is save that lookup list. So I'm going to go over to the setup page, or I could right-click. I believe there's a link there. And here's an option to link or unlink static data. So we'll go ahead and click that. And you must have a primary key in your table in order for it to show up in this list. I'll go ahead and click US States and click Save and Close. And so now I have a new change that I need to push up. So I'm going to go over to the commit, and I think every 20 seconds or so it will this will light up showing a change. I'm not sure exactly when that is going to happen, but now I have only my insert statements. So I'm going to go ahead and add state rows and commit that, and then send it up to GitHub. Okay, so when I go out there, I will see that I have a new folder called Data. And there is my US States table. I'm going to click on it and see all these insert statements. Oh no, I see a problem. The state of Illinois is misspelled. I'm going to have to fix that. So I've got, luckily, I have a script right here that can fix that problem, add that extra L that Illinois needs. I'm going to execute that and go back to source control, and it will, if we look at this, if I drag this over, you can see where now I've got Illinois spelled correctly, and up in source control it is not spelled correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and select that change and type in a comment. Commit, and then I'm going to push that change out to GitHub. Okay, so remember I started out creating a database for Josh. Josh is now not in sync, so I'm going to go over here and have Josh get the latest changes and pull from the repository. And we should see both of those changes, the new table and also the rows for the US states. I'll go ahead and apply the changes and let those. So if I look now, James has got that table. So one of the things that I thought was really, really important was referential integrity. So I decided to come up with a nice little interesting script here. And this script has three simple tables, table A, B, and C. Table A has a foreign key to table B, and table C has a foreign key to table A. And this is definitely legitimate, but what if whenever these scripts run to get a database in sync, what if they are just, don't run in the correct order? It's not going to work, obviously. So I'm going to go ahead and run this script to create those tables. So now they're in James. I'll go to source control. I'm going to go ahead and pull from the repository just to make sure that James is up to date, that there's nothing out there that he doesn't have. And that looks good. I'm going to go over to the commit tab. I don't think I spelled that right. That's okay. And I see I have my tables. If I take a closer look at the script, you'll see that it's got a create table A. Then I'm going to add the primary key constraint, and then I'm adding the foreign key constraint. So if that would just run, if that script for A would just run, it would fail because there's no table B at that point. I'll go ahead and commit this. We'll see what happens whenever Josh gets the changes. And that is taking it, there we go. And I'm going to push that out to GitHub. Shouldn't take too long. There we go. And now James has got the new tables. If I right click and refresh, there's my new tables. And now James has them, now Josh does not. So I'm going to go ahead and click Get Latest, pull from repository. And at this point, once I apply the changes, I'm wondering if this is even going to work, right? Because I've got a script for table A that includes the foreign key constraint, and actually, and in C, it's got the foreign key constraint to A. So, is this going to work correctly? So I'll go ahead and click Apply Changes. I did not get any error messages, and there are my tables. So if I take a look at A, make sure I'm in Josh here. Yeah. If I take a look at A and take a look at the keys, there's that foreign key to B, and if I take a look at C, there's the foreign key to A. So the tool is definitely smart enough to figure out how these scripts should be applied. I want to show you one more thing, and that is, what if, for some crazy reason, Josh and James ended up being assigned to do something to the same object, for example, the same stored procedure. So I take a look at the stored procedures. James has got an assignment to clean up the formatting in some stored procedures that have been around for a really long time. And Josh has actually been told to make a change to a particular stored procedure. And unfortunately, they both worked on these the same day. So if we look at the sales by year stored procedure, you'll notice it's got some odd formatting. For example, instead of having brackets around these view names, which this seems crazy anyway to have space, there's these quotes. Really don't like that. So I'm going to use SQL prompt, Control-K, Control-Y to format that for me, and notice that and I'll show you more about SQL prompt in just a bit, but notice that I've got brackets now instead of those crazy quotes, and everything's easier to read. So I'm going to go ahead and run that, and I'm going to commit it to GitHub. So I'm going to first pull from the repository to make sure there's nothing that I'm missing. And once that's done, I am going to, let's see. Did I run that? Maybe I didn't run it. Let me just make sure that I ran that. That's my problem. Okay, Control-K, Control-Y, run the proc, and then close it. Okay, so then I'm going to go back to source control, and it should find the change. All right, so we can see that my change is this nicely formatted stored procedure. I'm going to select that, click commit, and then I'm going to push it out to source control, to GitHub. So unfortunately, Josh was told to do something else to the proc on the same day. And let me just close that for a minute. Of course, I have a nice lockup of Management Studio. There we go. All right, so what I'm going to do here is just add something really quick just to make a change. Okay, so Josh is going to execute his change, and now Josh will want to push his change up. The first thing he's going to do is click Get Latest to make sure there's no conflicts or anything that he needs to pull. So he's going to pull from the repository. And when he does, here's this conflict. And the really great thing here is that SQL source control will not let him push this out. he's got to make a decision. He's either going to keep mine and overwrite that one, the other one, or bring this one down, which is probably the best thing. He'll bring that one down and then make his change and push back up. This tool doesn't have a way to merge changes at this point. You have to use one of our other tools or a third-party tool to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the slides. Obviously, SQL Source Control can do more than what I've had time to show today. All right. So the other tool I'd like to show you that can really help your team be more efficient and work together better is called SQL Prompt. This is a very, very popular tool from Redgate, and I hear people talking about it all the time, everywhere I go. Some of the features are advanced IntelliSense. Yeah, you've got IntelliSense in SSMS, but this is like IntelliSense on steroids. It kind of reads your mind. That's what I feel like whenever I first started using it. It has code analysis, looking for best practices, for example, enhanced scripting, and formatting. And I love the formatting. So let's go ahead and take a look at how to use SQL Prompt. I'm going to close Source Control, and I'm going to switch over to AdventureWorks. If you've seen me speak at SQL Saturdays and other events, you may have heard a presentation from me about T-SQL windowing functions. And I love writing queries with those functions when I'm using SQL Prompt because it helps me figure out some of the hardest pieces of that, which is what's called the frame. So what I want to do is get a list of customers, and you can already see the IntelliSense working. I'm just going to do that so I can get my, let's see, sales order header table. And it automatically filled in an alias for me. I love that as well. So what I'm going to do is get a list of the customers and their sales, and along with a subtotal. And the best way to do that, or not really a subtotal, let me do a running total. And the best way to do that is with a windowing function. So what I'm going to do, bring that down, and once I start typing, I get this great column picker and all suggestions. All suggestions got everything, but if I hit Control arrow, I can use this column picker to just choose the items that I would like in my query. So I want customer ID, order date, sales order ID, and total due is what I would like. Okay, so then I just hit Tab. So there is a query, a list of customers and their sales. So the next thing I'd like to do is just go ahead and write this windowing function, and I'm going to just start with sum total due over, so that should sound familiar if you've used window functions, and I really love how it starts giving me all the possible options here. So partition by, and then I can find my customer ID, order by, sales order ID, and this query would run, but it would not be efficient. It'd be really slow compared to what it could be. The piece I'm missing is the frame. The frame is a great thing, but it's hard to write. So I'm going to say, hit the, let me go back up here. And there's rows. I want rows. And here it gives me these options. Between, unbounded preceding, and current row. So it almost reads my mind. It really helps me figure out this framing clause, which is really difficult to write. So that's one of my favorite things about it. Another really cool thing is if I mouse over this column, I get the definition. So total due is not a regular column, it's a calculated column. It's a subtotal plus tax amount plus freight. And if I want to, I can click this little hyperlink right here and look for any dependencies. There's no dependencies on that column. Another thing I can do, let me bring this over like that. Another thing I can do is if I hover over like an object like sales order header, and click on the hyperlink there, I get the create table script and also a list of all the columns. So that's really handy because if I'm not using SQL prompt, I have a tendency to keep jumping back over to the Object Explorer to figure out what columns I need, what sizes they are. Another thing I can do is if I click on that, and if I do decide I want to go look at that table, if I hit Control F12, it will pop me over in Object Explorer right to that object. That is really, really cool, I think. Here's another thing that I love. Let's say that I start with, well, let me show you one thing that they have. There's snippets. Snippets will save you a ton of time. You can do something like SSF, and that stands for select star from. So if I hit tab, it just wrote that right out for me. And then I can just go ahead and choose my table. Now, I'm not going to want to keep that select star from. So all I have to do is just go over to it and hit tab. Let's see. Hit tab, and it, expands that for me. And in fact, let's say I had several of these. Say I had several of them, I could go up into the SQL prompt menu where you'll find a lot of different things that you can do. And I can choose this expand wildcard, and there's also a shortcut I could use, and it will expand all of them on the entire page. And oh, wait a minute, I forgot all my semicolons. So what can I do about that? SQL prompt has a command for that as well. Insert my semicolons. So if I click that, then every query gets the appropriate semicolon. Let me just show you the snippets really quickly. You can, let me go to the options, that'll be easier. Oh, there it is, Snippet Manager at the bottom. So the snippets, there are tons of them, so you can take a look and learn about the snippets and what you can do. Or you could, if you don't like exactly how they work, you can go in and edit them, and you can add your own as well. So the snippets are really, really handy. Let me show you another interesting thing that SQL prompt will do for you. Imagine that you, here again, I'm using a snippet, and there's placeholders and snippets that's going to fill in exactly where it needs to go. Imagine that I wrote a delete statement and I accidentally left out the where clause, okay? So if I just run this statement, unless I've decided I don't want this error or want this warning, I get this, this message box coming up telling me, hey, you may not want to execute this, okay? And I have my choice of execute or execute anyway. If that's annoying to you, you can turn it off. Another interesting thing is notice that there's this green squiggly line under this. We have best practices built right in to SQL prompt. And there's also this little blue, I guess it looks like a little light bulb icon over here. If I click that, I get an explanation of why this might be a problem. Again, best practices are not rules, they are just suggestions, really good suggestions usually. You can also disable the rule if you don't like that rule, or go out and see our online documentation to learn more. Let me show you another one. Let's see, select top 100 from, okay. So this one, notice that instead of a blue icon, we have an orange icon. If I click that one, there's something new. So at the apply fix button. So anytime you see the orange icon, and right now we've got 3 or 4 that this applies to, click the apply fix and close that up, and you can automatically just tell it what you want there. So over time, probably every release of future release of SQL prompt will have more and more of these automatic fixes for you. So there's a lot of things you can do besides just type in SQL prompt. Notice that I've got some really brightly colored windows here. Notice this one's red. So if I go, and SQL prompt is doing that for me. So if I go up to the options, and actually I didn't need that. If I go up to the options and go over to this color section, I can set colors for specific servers or instances. And in this case, I have the same instance, but I've decided that my Northwind database needs some special care. So I've decided to make that one red. So anytime that I'm connected to Northwind, my tab is red. And anytime I'm connected to a different database in that same instance, it's green or whatever color that I've decided to use. So I think that is really handy. Theoretically, we're not going to have things mixed on the same server as far as production and development, but sometimes, you know, I have been in really small environments, really small companies where they do have that situation, so this would come in handy for people like, or for companies like that. Let me show you some of the other interesting things that SQL prompt can do. Here's one. Let me go back to this code I've been writing. So this one, let's get rid of that since that's going to air out. Let's say that this was a stored procedure. I wanted all this code to be a stored procedure. So all I have to do is go up to SQL prompt, encapsulate as a new stored procedure, and this wizard comes up. The first thing I need to do is just give the procedure a name, click next. Then I just have to tell it whether I want my code in this window replaced with an exec command or do not replace. I'll go ahead and replace that. And then it doesn't run the script for you. It just goes ahead and sets up your create procedure statement and does all that for you. Let's see, earlier I showed you formatting actually in both demos, but let's talk a little bit about formatting. So I can format SQL. I love that feature. You can also choose different styles. If you want your comma before, the default has them after. You can go in and create your own styles or edit the existing styles if you wish. One of the things that makes this really great for teams is that you can come up with a formatting style and standardize on that formatting style so that everybody is doing the same thing. And SQL prompt can really help with that. If we go to the options, you'll see at the bottom there's an import and export. So there's dozens of features or dozens of options here that control how SQL prompt is going to work. And once you have everything set up the way you want it, you can export those settings, share them with the rest of the team. They can import that settings. And that's really great, especially onboarding a new team member or just when you're first getting started with SQL prompt on the team. There's some other things. For example, you can set up let's see, what do I want to look here for? Oh, snippets. You could put the snippet file, once you have, let's say you just want to standardize on that, you could put that out on a share someplace so that everyone saves it, or everyone can use it. And let's see, I'll close that up. There's one more thing, interesting feature I want to show you. And that is how to change an object name. So imagine that you have an object that's used in a bunch of views or it's used in a bunch of stored procedures. That's going to be a lot of work if you want to rename that. So there is a feature called Smart Rename. So for example, if I just wanted to add the number 1 here, I'll follow the wizard. And it'll go out and find all the dependencies. So there's a bunch of foreign keys. There are, these are the actions that will have to happen. And any warnings in case it determines that this is really a bad idea. and also any dependencies. So obviously, if you had to figure this all out yourself, it would take a lot of time. So I'll go ahead and click View Script. And at the top, there's just a summary of what's going to happen. And then we've got all of the commands. So that's really, really cool. I think I have time to show you one more thing. SQL prompt, find invalid objects. So I'm going to switch to 2017, I think. SQL prompt, find invalid objects. So what this will do is go out and look at all the stored procedures and see if there's anything that, a table name, that the table doesn't exist anymore, something like that. And switch to 2017. And once it's done, it will have a couple of options. You'll be able to either drop the object or just go ahead and select it as alters. So down here I've got a dbo.person table that doesn't exist. So what I'd like to do is just delete this stored procedure. Click that, close this up, and then there's my script. So there are lots and lots of other things that you can do with SQL prompt. I probably showed you just a fraction of what you can do. It's really a great tool for helping the team not only standardize, especially for formatting, things like that, but also to make them more productive. So everybody wants to write code that runs fast, but SQL prompt will really help you write code fast. So hopefully I said that right. I'm going to switch back over to the slides for just a minute. Next up, we're going to have Tom Austin talking about database deployment. So the first step is really getting the database in source control and tracking the changes. He's going to show you what you can do with that. So if you have any questions, be sure to put them in Twitter. We'll take a look at those after the session. And thank you so much for watching me today, and I will see you next time.